Catholic faith. For kids!
Hi, welcome back to Try Kids TV. I'm your host, Rachel, and today we have two special guests with us, my mom and children's author, Katie Warner.
Hi, Katie.
Hi, it's so great to be with you, Jamie and Rachel. I'm so glad to be on the show.
Well, we're so excited to have you. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to take it away, Rachel, with the first question.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became a writer?
Sure. Okay, so as you mentioned, my name's Katie Warner, and I have 4 young children, 7, 5, almost 3, and creeping closer to 1 that I homeschool. And also my husband and our kids and I live in Georgia and love the change of seasons. We moved here a few years ago after living in California and Orlando. And although those states were beautiful, we didn't get the 4 seasons. So we are loving this change to spring right now. And my whole life I've been involved in ministry. My dad actually started several nonprofit ministries when I was a kid. And so I've always been involved in ministry in some way, from just handing out envelopes in the back of churches to later on speaking about my faith. And I've always also been writing too, from when I was a kid onward, but specifically writing about the faith when I got a little bit older. And children's book writing, that one actually dropped into my lap without me expecting it, totally a work of the Holy Spirit. But when I was in graduate school for studying Catholic theology, one of my very, very dear friends, her name's Meg Whalen, she and I would go to class together, and she was in art school at the same time that she was in school studying theology. She must have had a lot of homework. And when we would be in class together, she would show me some of her latest art projects, and I just loved her artwork. And so years later, we were both living in Colorado when we met. But years later, we both ended up living in Florida with our families at the same time. And so I know, such a God incidence. And so we started to meet up with our kids in Florida, and we were sitting on the floor of her playroom one day, just talking about books and how much we wanted to see really great Catholic children's literature that wasn't just good in terms of its catechetical content, because there was a lot of that out there, but also really just beautiful. The kind of books that could stand up to the Barnes and Noble bestsellers that kids would, when their parents said, hey, go grab a book off the shelf or from the book basket, they would want to go and grab these because they were full of orthodox catechesis, but also fun and pretty and cool. And so as we started daydreaming this, and my desire to see her artwork get into more homes, we realized, let's do this. And just kind of felt like the Holy Spirit was putting it on our hearts to start a children's book line. And then from there, we came up with some samples. We actually wrote a few books before we even had them published. We just kind of got a few ready so that we could send them out to publishers and see if the Lord would continue to open doors to make it happen. And he did. And so now that I'm doing it, I can't imagine not doing it, because I absolutely love writing children's books, and I'm reading so many children's books all the time with my kids that I feel like my head's always bursting with ideas of more Catholic children's books that we could have that somehow mimic some of the great secular books that we have, or secular versions of certain books that we can somehow baptize and put a great Catholic theme to it and get it into more Catholic homes.
I like that term, baptize the book.
Right.
So that's really, so you had the book and you didn't, like, how do you get a book published? Can you explain that for like kids that want to be a writer someday maybe?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So we had, because of our relationship, Meg and I were, great friends already. So I had already had an illustrator, and that's, probably one of the hardest hurdles to get over, is most people don't approach the publisher with an illustrator already, working with them. So, but you don't need to, and you don't need to. So to get a book published, you can have even just a proposal. You don't always need to have the whole book written out, but for children's books in particular, you pretty much want the whole manuscript. I've published books that aren't children's books, and those ones sometimes you can just go to the publisher with an idea. But with a children's book, it's best to have the whole text in mind, even if that text is going to be edited a little bit. But you can approach several different publishers with your idea and the text of the book, and then often those publishers will have illustrators that they already work with, and so they'll pair an illustrator to your text and your particular work, and then kind of take it from there. So you basically sell your work words to the publisher, sell them your idea in your words, and then they help bring the book to life. In our case, because I work with illustrators who are also friends of mine, I'm very involved in the illustration process as well. So I get to see the pictures as they're being developed, and I get to comment on them and kind of give my own feedback. And also the illustrators that I work with, because they also love the faith and they're talented writers themselves, they'll give feedback on my writing. And so there's a really great partnership there that I love. But back when we were first trying to get a book deal, I just kind of, I would call it cold calling, but the email version, email cold, wrote all these different publishers by just submitting to the, acquisitions editor email address on all of their websites until we started hearing back. And to give kids out there who want to get published encouragement, I got a lot of no's. We had I would say more than half the people that I emailed said, no, we're not interested. And this was for our board books that we had, our first presentation to the publishers was our board books. And the first one that we presented was Cloud of Witnesses, a child's first book of saints. And I don't know if you've seen that board book. Let me see if I have it on my shelf. But it is a board book that is full of pictures of the saints and then quotes that the saints actually said themselves. So not a biography, but something specifically that each saint had a little piece of wisdom that they passed on. And this continues to be one of our best selling books, because originally the publisher said, I don't think families are going to like that. The quotes are going to be too over the heads of the children. We're not interested. And that's pretty much everybody who said no. That was kind of what they said no for. They said too over kids' heads. This has to be dumbed down. And Meg and I kind of stood our ground. I have a much more, firm personality than she does. So I said, nope, we're not changing it. We're going to find someone who wants this book. Because I really believed that our children actually can take in so much more than sometimes we even give them credit for, especially when it comes to their faith. And these saints have such beautiful wisdom to impart, not just for adults, but for kids too. And so Tan Books was interested, and which I was so grateful for, because I love Tan. I love their Orthodox content. I wanted to work with them. The more that we started talking with people on their team, the more we fell in love with the team and with the whole publishing company in general. I had so many Tan titles on my own shelves, and they also believed in the book, and they believe, this is good food, good soul food for kids, and wanted to give it a shot. And so all of our board books have kind of stayed in that same vein of wanting to raise the bar for what a children's book can be, especially a board book. And one piece of feedback that we often hear is that the adults finally like reading board books. Because it's kind of nice to sit down and say, oh, hey, I'm getting something out of this too, especially to the littlest children. Sometimes when you're reading board books, they're to kids who can't yet talk. My son is more eating it more than he is, listening. And so I can get something from the books too, which has been a huge blessing to hear that other families are experiencing that as well. And other kids with the board books in particular, older siblings can come and listen to the board book and feel like they got something out of it. And it's not just, one sentence that's kind of sprung through several pages, So yeah, that's basically what I would recommend, is just emailing those publishers, but also ahead of time, praying a lot about the process. Every time I sent an email, I said, Lord, I want your will to be done. If you don't want us to have our book published with this publisher, let them say no and give me the grace to accept that no. And that helped so much, because I didn't feel downtrodden every time I got a letter of regret. It made me realize, okay, that God doesn't want this, but on to the next one. And that helped a lot. And then also just practicing. The more years you spend practicing writing your own books, there's so many great self-publishing options these days that we did not have when I was a kid. So practice and then self-publish your books, give them to friends and relatives. That's actually what Meg, our illustrator, did for years before we got our deal with Tan, is she would print out from a self-publisher these beautiful books and then give them to people like me, friends of hers, for special occasions, and we would enjoy them and people would ask about them. And I said, I know, I want them to be a real book too. So all of that practice and self-publishing and things, there's just so many avenues now to make your book come to life and to be able to share it with others.
Awesome. Thank you. That's some really great advice. I love that. Praying about it and asking God for the grace to accept that no if it's not part of his will.
Right. Yeah.
That can carry over in a lot of ways.
Yes, I know. It's a tricky part of it, but it's good to practice because there's so many other areas of our lives where God says no or not yet. And we have to trust, okay, I know you know what's best for me.
Awesome. So how many years has it been since you published your first book? Do you know how long?
That's a great question. Does this have a pub date on here?
That's your first one.
2018. So, okay, so it's only been 3 years, but we are coming, our 10th book will be released in July.
Wow.
So it's been a very busy 3 years. Honestly, it's just, I mean, it's such a gift. Every book has its kind of own unique style and message. And we were hoping that over time we would come up with a library essentially full of just good, true, and beautiful Catholic children's books. And our library is developing a lot more rapidly than we anticipated. But I do think there will be a little bit of a slowing down.
Hold this up. We'll talk about your latest book.
Yeah.
For God. Is this is already out on the market, or it's coming soon, or it's
It is, yes. Yeah, it was released in February, right before Lent started, which was perfect timing because this is a great book to do. I mean, anytime, but a lot of families picked it up during Lent so that they could start silent time practice. So years ago, my kids and I would tell them the story of Elijah in the still small voice and, ask them, did Elijah hear God in the wind? No. Did he hear God in the earthquake? No. Did he hear God in the fire? No. Well, how did Elijah hear God? And they'd all get kind of quiet and say, in the still small voice. And then we use that story to lead into this practice called silent time, which basically was just me hoping to teach my children how to still themselves, still their bodies, and quiet their voices so that they could listen to God's voice in their life. They could learn the art of contemplative prayer, and which really starts with something that simple, just sitting in quiet. And we spend so much time in our lives and in our culture today listening to noise. So whether that's music on or, audiobooks, or I mean, in our house, it's usually, wholesome noise, but it's still noise. And so to be able to take a step back from even those good sounds and good noises, to have time to learn how to just listen to the quiet, I knew was a skill that I wanted my kids to develop because it's one that I want to be better at developing in my own life. And I struggle with. It's hard for me to sit in silence. My brain is always making noise if outside noise is not being made. Yeah. And so to be able to try and clear some of those thoughts so that I could just open my own heart, my own ears, so that I can listen to what God wants for me and the adventure he has for my life. And so this book is an effort to help children learn to do that, want to do that, realize the benefit of doing that, and then also to help equip parents to begin silent time in their own home. After the book released, there was one family that sent me a message and said that the mom read it to the whole family after dinner one night, and their oldest was 18 years old. And after the book finished, the 18-year-old said, wow, I've never heard that before. And the mom goes, you've never heard the story of Elijah? What kind of bad keys is going on in this house? And he goes, no, I've never heard our house that quiet before. So that's been one of my favorite pieces of feedback from people, is people emailing or sending messages on social media and saying, hey, it works. My kids were quiet. This is a miracle, And all joking aside, though, I do think that it will hopefully help plant the seeds for the importance of practicing silence. And then also just helping us recognize all the different ways that God is speaking to us in our lives that allow us to slowly uncover this plan that he has for us. I also like to say, back to the question about how do kids get books published, and how do you go about turning your ideas into books? You need silent time to do that. Mm-hmm. I haven't come up with a single book idea while my brain was busy and my hands were busy. I mean, all of the different book concepts that we've released to date have come out of silent time, sometimes in the middle of the night, sometimes in prayer. The Holy Spirit has a chance to speak into your life when you're being quiet. So that was the inspiration behind this book.
Awesome. At the end, you shared some tips for parents on how to, because, taking kids to adoration and thinking of that hour time and how they can sit still for an hour seems pretty intimidating, right?
Right. Yeah, no, you're right. At the back of the book, I do offer some advice for parents because one of the things I say is don't expect a monastery-like atmosphere in our home when we're doing this. I mean, I have young children, like I said, and so usually the toddler is asking, "Are we done yet? Are we done yet?" Throughout the quiet time, the baby's cooing and making noise, and one of the older siblings is reminding me that it's not actually perfectly silent because the baby's making noise. So, I mean, it's basically my reminder that this doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be perfectly silent for you to reap the benefits of it, because you're really just trying to instill the habit. And this book is meant to help you do that, to instill the habit of silent time, and then also and to grow in that habit. So you might just start with 1 minute. I wouldn't even blame you if you started with 20 seconds. I mean, you just kind of start with that little seed of time, and then you grow that over time. And so we eventually grew it up to 5 minutes. Then when the baby came, it like knocked back down to 2. So, and honestly, and I've also stopped watching the clock. Sometimes we just do it at the beginning of our family prayer time. We'll read Listening for God, and then, I'll put the book down and we'll have our silent time, and then start our family prayer. So, and which honestly, another huge benefit of it is it also helps the transition between kind of like the ruckus that is happening in a house before family prayer time, and then the stillness you want during family prayer time. And so that's actually been one of the biggest benefits I've noticed now that the book is in the mix, because we've been doing silent time even before the book came out. But now that we have the book helps get them excited to sit and to stop running around and, getting all their energy out.
We're going to be using that.
Right, exactly.
The family rosary can get a little.
Right, exactly. I know. And I think it's important for other families to know that. Like even me, sometimes I can during prayer time just be like, oh, we must be the worst at, at family prayer. And it's helpful when you realize that it's, there, like I said, it doesn't look like a monastery in other Catholic homes either. You're praying the rosary amidst kind of the, hey, cut it out, and that's natural and good, and the Lord is smiling on that because He's the one who gave all these little kids their wiggles and developmental stages, and to remember that as parents, I think, is helpful. On the flip side, I also always like to add the reminder that it's also okay to have expectations during prayer. Or someone asked me about this in terms of going to mass. It's also okay to have rules and expectations too. I think I used to be very worried that if I had expectations during mass or during prayer, and I set about rules to accomplish those expectations, that somehow I was going to drive all my kids away from the church, because there would be discipline going on during faith time, and then and I overthought it too much. And just like we expect respectful behavior from our kids all the rest of the time during the day, it's okay to be consistent and also expect that respectful behavior during prayer time. And so this book has also been helpful too, in just recognizing, this silent time, this stillness, this respect we're, giving God during prayer is also of benefit to you. Because if you're super busy and you're goofing off, then you can't hear God talking to you. And you want to hear His voice so that you can discover this plan that He has for your life, the big plan of your whole life, and then even the little things He has to say that can just change your day or change your moment or help you just become a saint a little bit more than you were, the day or the hour before.
You're not necessarily going to hear his actual voice, right? So I've had this conversation with our kids a couple times. We're like, well, what does that sound like when you hear him?
Yeah, and you know what? That's such a great question, because one, it sounds different for different people. Like there are people who audibly heard the voice of God, like Elijah. So we, I think kids can also get discouraged when they're like, God didn't talk to me.
Right.
God didn't talk to me. This is upsetting. So there's a few things that I like to keep in mind. One is to help kids notice all the ways that God is speaking to them throughout their day. And I mentioned some of those in the book too. Things like God talking to you in nature, like a rainbow. You know, God gave that as a gift to you. He's speaking to you, his love for you when he does that. You know, and you can count your blessings during the way and see how God is talking to you through those blessings that he's given you. Also, the Bible is God talking to us. So I always like to remind my kids that when you're reading the Bible, these stories that you're reading, these words of Jesus that you're reading, that's not just meant for the people listening on the mount that day when he was giving his sermon. That those are words meant for you. God is still speaking those words to you. So that also really helps them. Also the idea that that God's voice is more like a kind of a light lighting up your heart. That has helped me, because then I know, okay, I don't think this is coming from me, because there was just like some little piece of beauty or wisdom or truth just lit up my heart. Like this idea just lit up in my heart. I think that's God's voice, you know, talking to me. And then the other thing I like to do with my kids too is sometimes have them during their silent time. I recommend that they picture themselves with Jesus. So they all come up with very crazy places that they are with Jesus. I think the other day one of them was like sitting on a balloon with Jesus at a fair or something. So they like to get real creative with that now. But basically, if they can close their eyes or open their eyes or whatever and picture themselves being with Jesus, sometimes they'll actually be able to say, like, here's what he said to me, or here's what I feel like I heard him, you know, speaking to my heart. And again, my kids are really little. So the fact that they're even just kind of developing that habit of imagining being with Jesus and being open to what he might have to tell them is really the core at what we're getting at when we do this silent time.
That is beautiful. Oh, I love it. Got lots of good advice here. And Rachel read the book to her 4-year-old brother. And definitely his favorite part. I wish he's actually taking a nap, so we're just going to let him take a nap.
Ooh, a 4-year-old taking a nap. That sounds fine.
I don't know he's happened, but he definitely needed one. But I know afterwards when we asked him what his favorite time, and we'll probably share a clip of that because we did record, you know, her reading the book to him. But definitely want to go ahead and take it. Show her what.
Okay, his favorite part was the one where you crouched down and then you sprung up and you got to be the fighter.
Yeah, you know, that part, again, this is what it's helpful that I have my own little crew of test subjects when I'm writing children's books, because I do like to make the books, you know, interactive when possible, because it really does, especially in this book, you get to get your wiggles out by jumping around and doing all these fun things before you sit and be quiet. And I didn't even realize what a benefit that was until we got the book and we're doing it. I'm like, wow, this actually, thank you, Holy Spirit. That's exactly like I was hoping, you know. And it also gets kids excited. And because they know that's coming in the book, after they've read it once, they're like, let's keep doing it, because they know they want to get to that part where they can be the earthquake and the wind and the fire. And that part's really fun. So my hope was that some of those interactive elements would draw children in so that, you know, they could have that fun aspect, and then the parents and their future selves get the benefit of the silent time part, which is the real meat of the book and the purpose of it.
Yeah, but definitely very enjoyable, and to see him engage like that was really sweet.
I love to hear that.
And it keeps him coming back asking for more and wanting to read it more and more.
Oh, good.
He's fun.
Yeah, because usually when we read him like a normal book, he'll just like sit there and like lay down and like roll everywhere. And
you know, he must be an auditory learner. My son, I have one son who can be on the other side of the room, like with his head in the carpet. And I think he's not paying attention at all. And then later he recites the whole story to me. So it always amazes me, those different learning styles. I tell people that's usually how you can figure out what your child's learning style is while you're reading to them. What are they doing? You know, my daughter is right up next to me and kind of throwing a fit if she can't see the pictures.
Oh, yeah.
And then my other son, like I said, he's on the other side of the room, head in the carpet, rolling around, acts like he's not listening, but then he can recite the book word for word later. And then I have another daughter who can't really listen unless her hands are engaged doing something. So basically, that's your, visual, auditory, and kinesthetic learners right there. So kind of a fun little extra bonus tip that we didn't plan on talking about, I'm sure. But for parents, I thought that was so fascinating when I learned that, because I could apply that not only to prayer time, but then to so much of our learning and things that we do at home, when I realized what kind of learning styles they all had.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of good advice today. Thank you. I think we have a few of those. We have 6 kids, so yeah, I got one that definitely is like we have a huge van now that we have 6 kids.
I know, my husband.
Anybody could hear in the back row of the van, and all of a sudden he pipes up like he's heard every single word I've said from the front seat. I'm like,
I know. And actually, when they're little, before they can read, auditory learning, that's one of my favorite learning styles, because they can absorb so much without a lot of material. You know what I mean? Like audiobooks. I mean, it is insane the kind of knowledge that my son, he knows the Bible backwards and forwards thanks to Bible audiobooks, because he's an auditory learner. So yeah, it's all those learning styles are so neat when you watch them kind of manifesting themselves in different ways. Like you said, the back of the van, didn't even know you knew what were going on, but you're always tuned in.
So you are listening, just selective listening. Very good. Well, this is such a great book. Thank you so much for sharing this with us. I think it's a great gift or tool or anything for parents or people are looking for gifts. Is there anything else that you want to share before we?
Sure, yeah. Well, again, it was great to be with you guys. We'd love for people to follow us on our website, firstfaithtreasury.com. And we actually just started releasing monthly newsletters that are totally free and have a bunch of activities for kids that are usually liturgically themed for the month. And so that's been really neat to be able to kind of bring to life some supplemental resources for the books. We recently had some paper dolls in there from our book, Father Ben Gets Ready for Mass, and some other fun things. And then for your listeners in particular, I would recommend getting on our email list, because we have a book that's currently being illustrated right now. That's a companion to another book I wrote, Lily Lolek, Future Saint. It's basically a boy version. Oh. And when they go to Mass, it's going to be set in a traditional Latin Mass parish. So I know. So we're really excited about that, because that hasn't come to life. And well, we have a book, Father Ben Gets Ready for Mass, that was in a Novus Ordo parish. So we wanted to make sure that we had one that was in the traditional Latin Mass parish. We go to both in our parish. Our traditional Latin Mass parish is pretty far away from our house, and the Novus Ordo parish that we have nearby actually is we have an extremely reverent priest and liturgy, and we've just been very blessed in the area that we're in. And we also wanted to make sure we had children's books that span the gamut, just representing the beauty of the liturgy. And so I've been super excited. The illustrator Amy Rodriguez, who's doing this book, has been really enjoying even just kind of getting into the detail work on all the priest vestments and everything. So it's been really neat watching this come to life and just getting feedback from people. So I'm really excited. This one's going to come out next spring, but I love to have more people hear about it when it comes out, because I think it'll be a fun gift for the traditional Latin Mass community, because it's still going to be bright and colorful and have a beautiful message, but also represent the beautiful liturgy of the traditional Latin Mass. So
very exciting. And these really are beautiful books. I love just like the texture. I don't know, maybe if that's a touch and feel kind of person, I guess, but they're just really smooth and pretty and really nice and really nice.
Thank you. We were hoping for that. Like I said, we wanted something that looked as nice as the secular books that you buy and gift to others. So I'm really glad to hear that comes across.
Thanks so much for joining us, Katie. Bye for now, and Deo gratias.
Deo gratias. Thank you. Bye. Speaking of quiet, just give me 1 minute.
I know, it's a miracle. I feel like I'm relatively silent.
Boys, you gotta be quiet.
It's louder on your end than on mine, not to worry.
Okay. All right, good.
Quiet murmurs in the background. Sounds like happy playtime going on back there.
The 3 little ones, the ones that are 4 and under, are actually being really quiet. It's the ones that are.
Oh, well, that's what you got to worry about. The quiet
Rachel's like cringing over here too. She's like, my brothers are making this noise.